Yes.
Namaste, Brother Shankara.
Hello, Haima.
How are you?
I'm just busy right this minute getting us ready here. Morning, Catherine.
Good morning.
Good to see you here, dear.
Good to see you too, and all the others.
There's Cindy.
Hello, Cindy. Hello, Haima.
Balakrishna, namaste, Hari Om.
Hari Om, Shankaraji. What page, what chapter are we going to be reading?
We are on the talk active and contemplative life. Active and contemplative life.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, good morning, Brother Shankara.
Good morning. Oh, David, hello there. So good to see you.
Good to see you.
Have you got a busy rest of your day, David?
Yeah, it came off of 3 days of full training, no training all day, teaching all day. So I was teaching Wednesday, Thursday, Friday all day. So today's a little lower day,
Well,
slower.
that's good.
Yeah, it is.
It's good to be able to put your feet up a little bit. Good morning, Mr. Pkower. Good morning, Jenny.
Good morning, brother. How are you?
Doing reasonably well this morning. Thank you.
Wonderful to hear.
You might want to tip your screen down just a little bit. There you go. Now we can see you. Otherwise, we were just seeing you from your glasses up.
Well, that's my best part.
It pleases yourself. Hello, Keith.
Good morning.
Namaste.
Namaste. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. It's fun to watch people join in like this. Here's somebody whose name I can't quite read. I can't read the first name. Williams is the last name. It's my vision, not anything but that.
Yeardley.
Say your name, please, again.
Yeardley.
Yeardley. Thank you, Yeardley.
Welcome.
All right, as always, we'll wait just a couple of minutes. It's now 11 o'clock straight up. We'll wait till 11:02 to start so that people who are just clicking in and getting set up have a chance to be with us from the beginning. For those of you who didn't hear and have the book, which is Realizing God, it's a collection of Swami Prabhavananda's talks. The talk that we're going to read this morning is Active and Contemplative Life. I don't know what page that is, but for those of you who have the book, Active and Contemplative Life.
It is page 71, Shankara.
Page 71. Thank you, Bala. Good morning, Justine. Namaste.
Om Namah
Om Namah
Shivaya.
Shivaya. Okay, it's now 2 minutes after, so we will begin. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto you and to all beings everywhere. And of course, that is especially true now. So much disturbance in the force, so much anguish and death having to do with this pandemic. So if we can just hold in our hearts the best of thoughts for all of those who are struggling, suffering, and yea, dying of this virus. Swami Prabhavananda assures us that has a definite and beneficial effect. Now, for those of you who don't know anything about Swami Prabhavananda, I'm going to say a few words this morning. Swami Prabhavananda was one of the very close disciples of Swami Brahmananda. Brahmananda was the spiritual son of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. Brahmananda led the Ramakrishna order as its first president during its formative years, working very closely with Holy Mother. And Swami Prabhavananda had the opportunity to serve him and the order until he was sent to San Francisco in 1925. Swami Brahmananda left the body in 1922. Swami Prabhavananda was then trained to come to the West. It had been known for some time that he would go to the West, though he didn't really credit that much. He just couldn't see how that would happen, but in 1925 he was sent to San Francisco. And I say this because it lets you know something about his talks. The first thing he did was study the American people very closely. Now, San Francisco in those days was perhaps more representative than it is now of the American population. And so he was criticized actually for socializing so much with them, for spending time in their homes, going to their homes for dinner, going to lunch with them in restaurants, going to motion pictures with them, and so on. What he was doing was he was studying them. What is it that they know? What is it that they don't know? What is it that they believe and don't believe? How do they, hang on just a minute, there's cooking going on in the other room and I'm going to close the door. Somebody started frying something and it was making quite a bit of noise. So Swami, because of his intent study of the American mind and the American temperament, when he began to lecture in San Francisco, his lectures, his talks became very popular because he was directing them at like any good communicator, he had studied his audience. And so he was directing his talks to these people. So much so, he became so popular that his lectures, his talks, were outdrawing the head swamis by a remarkable amount. So in his youthful wisdom, he said to the head Swami, Swami, it might be a nice idea if I went to Portland to start a center. What do you think? And of course, the Swami embraced that idea. And Swami Prabhavananda went to Portland. He had been there, this was the Depression, mind you. This was the Depression. And it was a real struggle. I mean, for people to contribute a dime to the collection plate, so to speak, to come to a talk was something. And so the Swami was struggling to even have enough to eat and pay for a small apartment. A woman named Carrie Mead Wyckoff, who was one of the Mead sisters who had hosted Swami Vivekananda in South Pasadena, California, in late 1899 and early 1900. Mrs. Wyckoff was unhappy with the way Vedanta was being taught in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles area. Swami Paramananda had established a center there. Paramananda was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda, but he traveled a great deal. He was very rarely in Los Angeles itself. He had some nuns there and a couple of monks, but he himself was not there. These were all American young people, except for his niece, who was an Indian woman. So Mrs. Wyckoff, Carrie Mead Wyckoff, went to Portland and said to Swami, Swami, my brother has given me a small house and a monthly stipend. If you will come to Los Angeles and start a center, a good distance away from Paramananda's activities, as Los Angeles went, would you do that? And he said, well, write to Bellarmine and see what they say. And Bellarmine approved the arrangement. And that small house you can still visit. It is now the bookshop for the Vedanta Society of Southern California, as well as the offices for the administrative functions. So, and there's also the living room, which at that time was the lecture hall, and the small room just off that was the shrine. So you can still visit that place. Now, of course, the Vedanta Society of Southern California has become the largest. It was founded in 1929, formalized in 1931 as a nonprofit corporation. And so it's now the largest Vedanta center, Vedanta campus in the Western Hemisphere. And that is, of course, the residence of Swami Sarvadevanandaji now. Swami Prabhavananda, when he passed away July 4th, 1976, in December of 1976, Swami Swahananda, who'd been the head in Berkeley, came and took responsibility for the Vedanta Society of Southern California. And he ran it until he passed away in October of 2012. So that's a little background for these talks that you're hearing. The Swami gave talks from the 1930s, 1920s actually, but they started to be collected in the 1930s until just a month or two before his death in 1976. And just in case the question arises in your mind about my relationship with Swami Prabhavananda, through one of his disciples, he drew me to him in February of 1973. And I was part of the people who were close to him in the sense that I walked with him morning and evening, morning and afternoon, for much of the time that he lived. One didn't see him much in his room because of his health, but in any event, many of us would walk with him. So today, with that preamble, before I go on, are there any questions or comments that you'd like to make before we start the talk itself, before we start to read Swami's talk itself? Okay. I think you said, Balakrishna, that if you have the book, it's page 71. The title of the talk is Active and Contemplative Life. And as he often did, the Swami starts off with a bold and rather startling statement. The degree to which you enjoy the bliss of God in this life will determine the degree to which you will enjoy the bliss of God after death. Now, if you think about what Krishna says in chapter 2 of the Gita, that isn't so much of a surprise. Death is nothing more than shedding of the garment of this action and experience suit that we have. So it's a continuum. It's a continuum. But it does let us know that the efforts that we make in this life to enjoy the bliss of God will continue right on, uninterrupted, according to the Swami, will determine the degree to which you enjoy the bliss of God after death. There is a very false idea prevalent amongst many followers of many religions that heaven is to be attained, that we shall find God after we die. But if we study the source of any religion, we shall find that the truth has been brought out that heaven is within ourselves and that it is to be attained here and now. And this is the key idea that the Swami will develop in the rest of the talk. Our spiritual realization is to be attained here and now. We can allow ourselves to be distracted from that goal, and that no harm, no foul. If we're not harmful to others, we're simply just, so to speak, running on the hamster wheel of life, active and doing, occupied with all our activities, but really not making much progress. So the heaven, or the divine bliss, is within ourselves, and it has to be attained here and now. If in this life we have not been able to overcome hatred, jealousy, and passions, when we die the death of the body, we shall not be able to overcome them. Now, again, a very key idea. We do our development work. We do our change work while embodied. It is the purpose of being embodied, to experience the divine in all its forms. First, we're distracted by all the name and form. Later, we come to see that the name and form are just a covering, an upadhi, for the deeper truth. And so we overcome them. Wherever we go after death, we carry the same mind, the same consciousness with us. What an instruction. Wherever we go after death, we carry the same mind, the same consciousness with us. I shall try to explain to you, in short, the Hindu theory of evolution, which brings out the ultimate end and goal of every being on earth. The Hindu theory of evolution, which brings out the ultimate end and goal of every being on earth. You see a huge tree. That tree comes from a very tiny seed. Our theory is that the whole of that tree is in the seed. What we find in the effect is in the cause. What we find in the effect is in the cause. Now, this is a very seminal idea that he's starting to develop here. Tree, completely involute, completely contained in the seed. What we find in the effect is in the cause. In the process of evolution, there is no extraneous substance that gathers, but what is already in the cause unfolds in the course of time. A tree starts out as the tiny seed, bursts up through the effect of sunlight and nutrients, bursts up through the soil to a little green shoot, and grows and grows and grows, if it's not otherwise interfered with, into a huge tree. At one extreme, we find in this universe dull, dead, inert matter. So it seems, at least. At one extreme, we find in this universe dull, dead, inert matter. At the other extreme, we find a Christ, a Buddha, and a lumen seer. There is no difference whatsoever between Christ and God. There is no difference between an illumined seer who has attained unitive knowledge and God. Not the least bit of difference. In other words, they have come to the end of their evolution. And so it's anything that seems to separate them from that which they are is simply an illusion, a surface. There is no difference whatsoever between Christ and God. There is no difference between an illumined seer who has attained unitive knowledge about God. Not the least bit of difference. In the Upanishads we read, a knower of Brahman becomes Brahman, Mundaka Upanishad. A knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. Now that's a whole other talk about why that's so. Knowledge of God means unity with God, becoming God. Therefore, it stands to reason that God, which we find unfolded in a Christ or Buddha, exists completely in the minutest, dull, dead, inert matter. Now this is Advaita. This is non-dualism expressed in this way. God, which we find unfolded in a Christ or Buddha, exists completely, but not yet manifest or evolved in the minutest, dull, dead, inert matter. In the vegetable kingdom and in the mineral kingdom, there is that infinite God. By that is meant eternal life, infinite consciousness, abiding happiness, Satchidananda. Satchidananda granite, Satchidananda redwood, Satchidananda moss, Satchidananda lava. The infinite God, eternal life, eternal consciousness, abiding happiness exists in all of that. That is God. It exists in a potential form everywhere, but remains covered with darkness. Darkness, tamas. Our lack of shining the light of knowledge on it. So it remains covered in darkness. In the mineral kingdom, there is just darkness, except when we come to diamonds and diamonds and emeralds and so on. We find that the light sparkles through them, the crystal world. In the mineral kingdom, there is just darkness. But when we come to the vegetable kingdom, we find that though matter or darkness predominates, a stalk of celery does not seem to us to be that eminently conscious. Moss does not seem to us to manifest consciousness or awareness. When we come to the vegetable kingdom, we find that though matter or darkness predominates, there is a certain release of consciousness. The plant can react. Now, I don't think the Swami goes into this, so I'll note it. There was a scientist named Bose in India who tested this and showed it to Vivekananda and others, Rabindranath Tagore, Vivekananda and others, showed that if you threaten a plant with burning it, it reacts. And it isn't just with a match, it could be something else that will burn it, like an acid. In other words, it is your awareness of what is going to happen that is understood and reacted to by the plant. If you play, this is later experiments have been done where beautiful, harmonious music was played in the presence of plants, and they flourished. And inharmonious, dark, repressive music was played in the presence of these plants, and they withered. No other change in their circumstances other than just the music. The plant can react. When we come to the animal kingdom, we find that consciousness predominates. But there is no self-consciousness, no what we call intelligence. We equate intelligence with self-consciousness. When we come to the animal kingdom, we find that consciousness predominates, but there is no self-consciousness, no intelligence. This is actually somewhat debatable, but the Swami means in a categorical sense. When we come to human beings, we find self-consciousness evolved. But the human is a slave to matter, to darkness. The human being is a slave to matter, to darkness. Vivekananda said, nature is not, the soul is not for nature. Nature is for the soul. The Swami is saying, this is, we have given way to the idea that we are a slave to nature, to matter, to darkness. In the illumined seer, or a Christ or Buddha, we see that infinite consciousness infinitely released. Infinite consciousness, Satchidananda, infinitely released. Along with that is attained eternal life and infinite bliss. As I said, Satchidananda. The illumined seer transcends the self-consciousness or ego, which limits infinite consciousness. The sense of ego is wiped out and infinite consciousness becomes released or unfolded. I'm going to pause just a moment and because this is such a key idea about the ego wiped out. If you look at the scriptures of the world, what does Allah mean? Allah means the one, the one. Christ said, I and my Father are one. Sri Ramakrishna said, I and the Mother are one. There is only one. There is only one ego in universe, in manifestation. There is only one eye maker, ahamkara. What we see in ourselves is a reflection of that. We see in ourselves a reflection of this one. And we've done this deliberately. This is not something that has been done to us. We, as the one, said at some point, I am one, I shall become many. And so this dream of manyness began. And it happens by this action and experience suit is a hall of mirrors in which all of the attributes and aspects of the divine are reflected to a greater or lesser degree in the fully illumined seer, totally reflected. As a matter of fact, the reflecting medium has disappeared. They are that, as it says, the knower Brahman becomes Brahman. But for us, this sense of ego, this sense of being a separate being, it's necessary to continue this activity of universe. But let us not be deceived. There is only one. And so when the Swami is saying In the illumined seer, the Christ or the Buddha, this ego is wiped out and infinite consciousness becomes released or unfolded. The awareness and the consciousness, right now we have awareness of consciousness, you and I. We have awareness of consciousness. When we become that consciousness, and we no longer have this reflection in awareness of our consciousness, self-consciousness. This is what the Swami means by ego wiped out. Nothing is lost. Everything is gained. Infinite consciousness becomes released or unfolded. So this is a good place to pause. Excuse me. This is a good place to pause and ask if there are any, because everything is going to be built on this now. And now the condition, so on. We're going to go on to something else. So any questions or comments at this point? Hello? Yes.
Yeah, just have one comment, I guess. It's the, you talked about the activity of the universe, right? And if you look at what that means, it's like, uni means one, and a verse is like a verse of a line of poetry or music. So it's like when there's one song of the universe. So that's all I just wanted to share, comment.
Nice translation. Nice translation. Beautiful. One song. Beautiful. Yes. Liam, thank you. Anyone else?
Brother Shankara, this is
Yes,
Jenny.
please. Jenny.
It's a comment kind of like Liam's. It's just about a word. Unfolded and unfurled seems similar to me. And just, thinking about Ramakrishna saying, you just need to unfurl your sails.
Exactly.
For the winds of grace to blow.
Right. It is identical. As we unfold ourselves, it unfurls our sails. And what is the rest of what he's saying? That is the way we catch the breeze of grace, which is always blowing. And the breeze of grace will always blow us in the right direction, toward greater and greater unfoldment, toward greater and greater being. Good. Anyone else?
I love what Liam said, and Jenny too, but the verse, universe, that's I love that. I love this whole topic, the one and the reflection, and I was thinking about this morning and wrote each life. And I was thinking not just human lives, but the life of each human and each tree and each bird and insect. Each life is a part of the journey God is on. What leg of the trip God is on.
Yeah. This is the way this great saints express it. God is continuing, and Vivekananda says exactly the same thing. Most emphatically, he says it in a number of places, but most emphatically in his talks called Inspired Talks that he gave in July 1895, June, July 1895 in Thousand Island Park. You can buy that book, Inspired Talks. That God continues to unfold. God is infinite. There is no end to God. There is only our experience of this tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of God. As St. Thomas Aquinas put it, if you drew a circle around the frontiers of space, by that he meant the entirety of everything we can observe as universe. If you drew a circle around the frontiers of space, God could barely fit a toe there. You're trying to give us some sense of the immensity of what we're touching as it passes before, as consciousness unfolding passes before our awareness. Thank you, Cindy. Anybody else? Okay, let's see, what are we doing for time? Okay, we got lots of time, good. Now, the condition for this unitive knowledge of God, to realize this God from within us, the birth in spirit, as Jesus calls it, or the awakening, as Buddha says, is to unite our mind, our awareness, with the spirit, the consciousness. Just to equate the terms I've been using with the terms that the Swami's been using. This birth in spirit, as Jesus called it, or the awakening, as Buddha says, is to unite our mind with the spirit. In other words, contemplative life, the life of union with God, is the end. But we find that the natural tendency is to unite our thoughts with the objective universe, because the senses are outgoing. That is how they have been created. The mind is attached to the senses. And so as the senses go out, the mind also goes outward into the external world, forgetting the kingdom of God which is within. And so again, there's no reason for self-accusation. There's no reason to think badly of yourself or of anyone else for their tendency to be outgoing, for their tendency of their senses to reach out for this or for that. That is the way the package is built. We built it, we, the divine person, built it in order to remain distracted. Otherwise, the game is instantly over. So it's when we become aware of this, oh, this is doing this, this action and experience suit is doing this because that's the way I built it. I built it, I can stop it. The mind also goes outward into the external world, forgetting the kingdom of God, which is within. Further, the natural tendency is to seek fulfillment through activities and life in the world. If we understand that the goal is to unfold, if we understand that the goal is to unfold the Godhead within, and about that, our religions are in complete agreement. And you can study them all and find that that's absolutely the truth. The goal is to discover and unfold that Godhead within. And about that, our religions are in complete agreement. Then we can easily understand that activity or active life is not the end, but that contemplative life in union with God is the end. And so our reaching outward into the world is not the point of being in this action and experience suit. Not for us. Those who are seeking, those who are sitting together, even though virtually sitting together this morning. It's no longer the goal for us. We are further evolved, not better, just different. For us, the active, the activity or the active life is not the end. Contemplative life in union with God is the end. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here this morning. We wouldn't be doing this together. Why then does the mind become attached to the objective world? Because through ignorance of what it's done, the divine being covered by the ignorance of Maya in this action and experience suit, through ignorance, it accepts the shadow of life, the appearance of life as real. Through ignorance, that infinite God within remains covered. The mind gets a reflection of that consciousness, of that happiness, of that eternal life, and wants to realize it. But because of the way we built this suit, we think it's out there. And that's what we have to dispel within ourselves. That there's anything in any way thoroughly or permanently satisfactory out there. Ultimately, when our vision is completely pure, we see that all out there is that also. And so we take great joy in it, but without the least bit of attachment, without the least bit of seeking. Again, this is the testimony of the saints. They revel in the objective universe without being the least attached to their revelry or to the things themselves that cause them enjoyment. So there's nothing wrong in the objective universe. There are the unpleasant aspects of the dark side of it, the evil. We discussed that some time ago. Yes, there is that. And as Christ said, resist not evil. In other words, don't entangle yourself with it. So we want to realize that happiness, that eternal life. But the mind does not know that it is already within. And so it tries to find in the objective world through the senses, find it in the objective world through the senses. This life on the plane of the ego, which arises when there is forgetfulness, this is life on the plane of the ego, which arises when there is forgetfulness of God within. It obstructs our vision of the reality. Our mind, our reflection, which is distorted and fragmentary, obstructs our vision of the reality, which is why Chaitanya, recommending one way of going about clarifying the matter, says, chant the name of the Lord and his glory unceasingly, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean and quenched that mighty forest fire, worldly lust raging furiously within, that tendency of the senses to reach outward. It obstructs our vision of the reality. Try to understand what the objective world is. It is an appearance. Appearance cannot exist without something behind it. As you understand what there is behind the appearance, you will find that God alone exists. I'll read that alone again. The world outside is an appearance. Appearance cannot exist without something behind it. As you understand what there is behind the appearance, you will find that God alone exists. You see, you cannot blind your eyes or numb your senses and sense organs. That would not be religion. In other words, you can't do that kind of austerity and get there. You can't blind yourself, you can't numb your senses or sense organs. This is what we do when we try through alcohol and drugs and so on to self-medicate away our anxiety and our unhappiness and our weariness. We try to blind or numb ourselves. That would not be religion. That would not be growth. Try to find out how God is the ground of all this appearance. Try to find out how God is the ground of all this appearance and how God is the reality within you. When you understand that, go into the external world and work. Now, this is exactly what Christ meant when he said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you." And Sri Ramakrishna said, first find God, then hold to the pillar of that knowledge and dance for all your worth. When you understand the reality within you, you can go into the world and work. Be active, use your senses and sense organs, but all the time remember that under all circumstances, at all times, in all places, in everything, you must see God and God alone. Now, when the Swami says must, please don't think this is dogma. This is if you are seeking for the highest. If you are seeking for the highest. It is not that if you aren't doing that, there's something wrong with you. It's just that you're still more or less asleep. You have not much begun the process of awakening. So when he says, in all these circumstances, you must see God and God alone. This is what we do when we are making this quest, when we are on this eternal quest to discover the infinite, the one divine presence that is behind all phenomena, including ourselves, our minds, everything about us. We are a phenomenon. We are a verb. We're not a thing. Being is a verb. Good, we have just the right amount of time. So with all of that, what do you see as challenges to this for yourself? What are your thoughts, your comments, your questions? This is where we, as I say, this is where we practice together the art of spirituality. And we really do help one another when we voice our questions, our comments, our concerns. Because you may find that someone else, almost certainly there will be someone else who shares that or something very like it. So please speak out and say what's on your mind.
Brother Shankara, this is
Yes,
Hema. This chapter is really aligned with the stuff that we're going through right now with the COVID. All along, I mean, I'm guilty too. A lot of the fulfillment through activities in life outside ourselves. Now the COVID kind of nature gave us a pause. It paused our life to see the oneness of the universe, find the God, divinity within ourselves. It gave us more time than ever before in our lifetime. I think this chapter is perfect for the time that we are going through our new normal life.
Thank you.
That's all. Thank you.
I agree. We can put this time that has been given to us by our need to be physically isolated and working from home and however it is that we're coping with this business. I think all of us find we have more time to make use of, how to make use of it. This chapter is very instructive.
Brother Shankara.
Yes, good morning, Swayam.
Good morning. I agree with Haima. This is a wonderful chapter. I mean, it just opens up so many possibilities. So a couple of questions. One question I had is this sense of doership so hard to give up because the little I is a reflection of the one I maker? That's one question. And the other one is contemplative life in union with God. Is Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana the steps in that direction?
Shravana, for Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana are the specific steps for the workbook of Advaita Vedanta, Jnana Yoga. So yes, they are emphatically the steps in that direction. And of course, we can all use them in addition to whatever workbook is closest to our temperament. But you know, we may be temperamentally more a karma yogi, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to listen carefully the Shravana. We're not going to take in what we've heard as truths and compare them with how we think and how we behave and see which is the higher and more aligned with what it is that we want, the goal of realization. And then Nididhyasana, when we discover that those truths are in fact the higher truths, we insist on them. We begin to make them part of our, as much as possible, every moment's thinking. Now, as far as your first question goes, why is this sense of doership so hard to give up? Well, first of all, it is because we are part of a very long evolution. This action and experience suit that we have is said to be the culmination, the ultimate end product of many, 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 perhaps even millions of lifetimes. If we think about how long an insect lives, insects live days to months. Cats live a few years, maybe as much as 20, 21 years, 22 years. So as a tree, we may have lived for 2,000 years. But we are used to thinking unconsciously, without any self-consciousness, of ourselves as the doer. The reflection reflects in a cat, in a tree, in a bug, in an amoeba, and it acts. So we're used to thinking of ourselves as the doer, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. What we now understand is that there is a consciousness behind this awareness, and it is that is providing the impetus for the doing. Speech cannot hold thee nor mind, yet without thee we think not nor speak. Without thee, the consciousness, we think not nor speak. So it is that which is providing the doing. And we are that which is witnessing it. We are the two things at once. We are the active consciousness and the observing consciousness. We created this in order to observe it. I am one, I shall become many. The day of Brahma. And so, yes, it's very hard for us, particularly since the surface of our reflecting medium, as Swami Sridharananda says, is dirty. not dirty with filth, but just dirty with the dust of all of these millennia of experience. It's coated with all of this residue. So slowly and slowly, he says, through spiritual practice, we clean away that residue. He said it so beautifully. With a soft white cotton glove, we slowly wipe away the dirt that covers this beautiful Belgian mirror. Those are his words. The Belgian mirrors have beautiful frames. I mean, he was thinking of something very specific. You know, the Belgians at one time, at least, I don't know that they are now, but at one time were famous for their beautiful mirrors. You wipe away with this soft cotton glove of the mantra. You slowly and slowly wipe away the dirt covering this beautiful Belgian mirror. And then you see the perfect reflection. And in that ecstasy, you and the reflection both disappear. But this is a process. It was a long process to get here. As again, I say, for any of you who wish to read a very poetic evocation of this, a very poetic description of this process and how it unfolds to get us to where we are, and then how it unfolds as we depart from the appearance and become ourselves, the truth of ourselves, read the last 4 pages of Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. He just absolutely gives the most beautiful and poetic description of the divine presence as the active, which he characterizes as mother, and ourselves as the divine being that is self-forgetting, and how she educates us and then releases us back to our primordial self. Very good question, Smile.
Thank you, Brother Shankar. Those wonderful words to hear.
Anyone else? This is just exactly it.
Yeah, this is Keith. I have a kind of a basic question. I'm sure you guys probably already know this, but I'm still learning. I'm assuming karma is not accumulated until you're in human form. I don't imagine you can accumulate karma as a tree, as, you know, blade of grass.
Well, you know, this is a very interesting question. I once had a brief discussion with one of the Swamis in Hollywood about, you know, flowers. Do flowers accumulate karma? I mean, obviously, is it the destiny of a flower to be cut and used in worship? Or is it some sort of karma? But what Sri Ramakrishna said is, don't worry about it so much, my dears. Don't worry about so much the past karma. And Swami Vivekananda also, just go forward from here. Now, Keith, it's perfectly natural to be curious about these things. Perfectly. And if you want to read what I was told by Swami Swahananda, the Swami that sent me here, the most wonderful disquisition, most wonderful explanation of this, read Swami Abhedananda's The Doctrine of Karma. It's 4 lectures that he gave at the University of Berkeley in, I think, 1917, 18, something like that. The Doctrine of Karma, it explains it so beautifully. Swami Swahananda actually used to give his disciples that book. So you asked me a question about something to read, that would be a good next one. But what Sri Ramakrishna said is, don't worry so much about the karma, your karma in the past would accumulate it, because your spiritual efforts, your spiritual sadhana, your development will render neutral all of those old karmas in any case. They will first go dormant, no longer have the kind of effects that they would have if you were not awakened. And if you dispel, as you dispel the idea of doership, then you stop accumulating new karmas. And ultimately, you understand that karma is simply something that happens to the two levels of this action and experience suit, the gross body and the subtle body. It has nothing to do with you at all. So,
thank you.
But the doctrine of karma, Swami Abhedananda, Abhedananda, Swami Abhedananda. You can get copies of it online or from Vedanta.com. Online by, I mean, Amazon, that kind of bookseller.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Hi, it's Cindy's. I just
Yes,
wanted to share something when you were talking about the yogis not being a yogi not being attached to anything, including reveling in the experience of the world and not being attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
I recently heard someone talking to somebody else who was not happy, was going through a real unhappy period, and she was helping him out, and she said, happiness is wonderful. It doesn't matter whose it is. It doesn't have to be yours. And that's what it's, happiness is wonderful when you're not attached to it, as being yours, my happiness.
Yes.
Yeah, it was really a great
It's one of the reasons that I keep recommending that book, Love Poems from God, which is testimony of the saints, because you share, to the point of tears, you share their exaltation, their joy, their happiness, their revelry in being who they are. And it's so inspiring and so sweet, so deeply sweet. It's beautiful. And they do revel in it. And it's just right in the scriptures, the Hindu scriptures as well. Reveling in the self, they call it. Reveling in the self. And the self is what? The self is the infinite being that is unfolding in every direction eternally. Which, of course, we have no ideas what infinite and eternal mean, but we get some glimpse when we say those words. Thank you, Cindy. That was very good. Yes, it doesn't matter whose happiness it is. And boy, howdy does Patanjali lean on that in the Yoga Sutras. Just enjoy the heck out of other people's happiness, and sorrow with them when they are sorrowful or afflicted. Share that with them. And Krishna says it too in the Gita. Anybody else? Well, what time's it got to be? Well, it's just a little bit after noon.
Shankaraji.
Yes, Balaji.
I've been thinking all along before, to practice, to divinize everything. I used to think iti is the better way than neti.
Mm-hmm.
I changed my mind.
Okay. Good. Why?
But, well, the reason is with iti, you are thinking everything is God, but you forget about it when you're doing something.
Yes.
But on the neti, it is like a nididhyasana. This is not. Mm-hmm. So even whatever you are doing, no, this is not. So I think this is a better way of nididhyasana to divinize things. That's number one. I don't know, maybe you can tell me whether I'm still in the right path or not.
Mm-hmm.
Second thing is, while we're reading in the second para, you said, second para, third line, what it says is to unite our mind with the spirit. And when you read that mind, you said awareness. Is the mind, are you referring awareness to the mind?
Yes.
Awareness to the self?
The self is consciousness.
Okay, say
our awareness is the reflection of that in the mind.
Okay.
That's what I was saying. Now, there are many ways of talking about this, Balakrishna ji. And this is just the way that I have adopted. That consciousness is what is. Our awareness of it is what obtains in us. This is what we're aware of consciousness. We're aware of all of the objectification of consciousness in name and form through our mind. So I equate mind and awareness. Other people use the vocabulary differently. Now, to go back to the first point you made, neti neti versus iti iti. Sri Ramakrishna is very clear that first we have to practice neti neti. First we have to say, no, 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 this is not it. This is not it. This is not it. This is, he says it's only afterwards, when through neti neti, we reach the roof, we can look back down the stairs that we have one by one said, not this, not that, to each of the stairs, and see that the stairs are made of the same stuff. He says, brick lime and brick dust. The roof is made of brick lime and brick dust. And that when we look back down the stairs that we've climbed, we see that the stairs are also made of brick lime and brick dust. So it's only then that we can say iti iti and mean it. Now, for someone practicing the bhakta's path, they take this iti iti stand from the beginning. They take it as a stand, even though they don't know it yet. They don't know it in the sense of deep knowledge of the reality. They say, this is God, this is God's glory, this is God's actions. This is the way they divinize it. But for anyone practicing the other yogas, the neti neti path is the way. But you'll notice that Sri Ramakrishna, if you start reading chapter 5 of the Gospel, page 132, you'll find that Sri Ramakrishna is very specific that the bhaktas practice iti iti from the beginning. But what you said about yourself and your practice of this, and the proper way to divinize things for yourself, perfect, absolutely perfect. It's just that because we are reflections of the infinite, no particular path, this is why Vivekananda says, no dogma, no dogma. It doesn't fit every man. Ultimately, he says, every man, by this he means every human being. Every human being, their own sect, S-E-C-T. Every human, because we are a reflection of the infinite, the eternal. No cookie cutter formula is going to work. But each of us, and you're doing something which is absolutely perfect, which is your mind is becoming your guru. You have your instructions from the guru in the beginning, and you should follow them for 2, 3, 4 years. Follow them to the very best of your ability and gain what is the fruits of what the Swami has given you as little seeds to grow into your fruit tree. But afterward, then you begin to think for yourself. You begin to compare. You begin to do that manana in a very deep fashion. And you reach conclusions like the one you reached, Bala, which is just perfect for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shankaraji.
This is what is meant by studying the art of spirituality together, folks. This is just so beautiful. Anything else?
Yes, Brother Shankara.
Yes.
So just kind of on that last comment, at least what comes to mind, and for me, and how I approach it is like it's not so much a this or that, right? Like it's not like a net eti is a and neti is like not a, right? And like to use
Right.
it in symbolic logic. So it's like it's not really a this or that. The way I view it is it's more of like a polar. It's like this and that. So it's a and not a, because I know for me, while I began the path, looking at what it was not, that ultimately helped me realize that it all is, right? And so it's like even the not is also part of the is in a kind of a, I know it doesn't really make such sense when it's said, in language, because, and it's, it's kind of counter logical, right? Like in logic, it's like they say a and not a is not a valid statement, but in this trying to describe this infinite, it to me, it makes sense. That's kind of
Right.
how I.
Beautiful. And Liam, that's why the language of mathematics was invented, to try to get more precise about these things. But it's exactly what you said is exactly what Sri Ramakrishna was pointing to when he said, there is and is not, and then there is something beyond is and is not. And he called this vijnana, special knowledge. When we first begin to get glimpses of that special knowledge, the feeling is, wait a minute, more of that, because what is it? It's beyond limitation. And that's what we're seeking to be, beyond limitation. Beyond limitation. Is and is not are both limitations. And we are seeking to be what we truly are, beyond limitation. Thank you, Leo. Anyone else? Okay.
Brother Shankar, if I could get 5 minutes after this is over, this is Keith.
Yeah, Keith, why don't you call me on the phone?
Okay.
Rather, because if we do it after we end the meeting for everybody else, it goes on the recording.
Okay, is it the number that's on the website?
No, 818
Uh-huh.
913
Uh-huh.
0345.
818-913-0345.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else before we go? Okay. Oh, dearly beloved, a flower at your feet for each one who comes to your open door. A flower at your feet for each one who stands by your open door and says, come to me, offering to break this world's chain that binds us down to ignorance, suffering, and death. A flower at your feet for each one who takes the path that you have struck through this, your jungle world. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Amen. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. If we see you tomorrow morning, that'll be sweet. Otherwise, we'll see you the next time we see you. Tomorrow morning at 11, Sri Krishna's Karma Yoga chapter 3 of the Gita.
Wonderful.
Thank you,
Sometimes it takes
Shankara.
me a minute.
Thank you, brother.
Oh, you're most welcome, dears, all of you.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. See you tomorrow.
See
Thank
you
you, Brother
tomorrow.
Shankara.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Whenever I go down to where it says end meeting, there we go. Okay.